Hello, YouTube. It's Dos Gregor, and it's what everybody's been waiting for. That's right. Today I am going to be building Gentoo from LFS, and we will start from the very beginning and work our way through the handbook. And I will go over how anybody using Linux, no matter what flavor, this should work for you to getting started and getting your feet wet in a live partition for Gentoo, not in VirtualBox. And so we'll record this all the way up to the point where I have to reboot the system and test out everything. And then once I've done that, I'll probably reboot back into LFS and we'll create um, our ch root back into it so that we can see it. And then we'll go forward with what we need to do to get a basic graphic interface and all the rest kind of installed and get our sound working, etc. Network, all that good stuff. And if all that works, eventually we'll be able then to go back out of the video and check to see if everything works. This video will probably be part one of I don't know how many just yet because I don't like having to put videos together and who knows how long this one will be. So without further ado, first off, I have LFS here. I've been running LFS now for a couple months, been very happy with it. It was difficult to use, and it's time to try something a little bit different, and I'm not ready just to blow it away just yet. So in this tutorial, we have a few things we need to set up. So first off, I'm not going to talk about how to partition, how to set up something off to the side and do those sort of things. That sort of thing really you ought to know how to do before you start attempting Gentoo to begin with. And if you've tried LFS, you pretty much already know how to do this. So if we do, let's see, I think you have to do sudo for this, and fdisk-l, we will see that my current partitioning scheme is thus. I have a 2 gig swap, which nowadays with all the RAM, I just don't see the necessity for that any longer. In fact, most of the time my 2 gig swap, or I think at one time I had 4 gig swap, was showing absolutely nothing. I initially had an SDA2 partition, which was my LFS partition, and it was the whole rest of the hard drive. I have made that smaller, and I have created myself a 25 gig partition for Gentoo on SDA3. Now, I have already tested a lot of this stuff out, so if we go ahead and I created myself a mount point, so we're going to do an SDA3, and we're going to mount, of course, not just list that. And we're going to go to /mount/Gentoo. And if we look at that, you will see that I have already built it once and it's there. But we're going to wipe that away. We're going to have it clean and we're going to start all over to learn this. So let's go ahead and unmount that real quick. And now we'll see that that's gone. Do a quick search of that. It should be empty. Yep. And we're going to want to format that partition. But let's go to the manual. So gentoo.org, your friend for Gentoo. One of the first things that you're going to want to do is go ahead and find the getting started. And we want to get our instructions, the Gentoo handbook. So let's go to the Gentoo handbook. Now we're going to be using AMD 64 as our model, so let's go there. And we are going to be installing Gentoo. Now, If you've done all of what you need to do to prep this drive, you don't really need to go through the About Gentoo Linux. You don't need to go through the right installation medium because we're going to be utilizing your host system for this. We don't have to worry about configuring the network because your host system's network should already be running. Now you can go through the preparing the disks in case you still need to format those disks, but pretty much we'll just go ahead and start there. And we don't have to worry about, of course, MBR, GPT, that should already be set up. A lot of this stuff we don't have to deal with. That's one of the best things when you build Gentoo from just the way it's set up now. We just need to get down to even the drive partitioning. You don't really want to worry about this. We're going to use for our boot, for instance, we're going to be using our current setup. We're going to be using Grub from LFS in this case. Whether or not you need to do a swap, you can use the same swap you use for the other partition. You don't have to deal with that. You don't have to deal with parted or any of this. It's really nice. You can just come on down and try to find where it starts talking about creating the drives. Now, personally, I guess out of habit, for so many years, I've always used fdisk, and I've always used an MBR partition scheme for the most part, and that's just mainly because that's what I've done for years and years and years. We can just skip on down this. We're pretty much going to worry about the root partition and creating that. Right down here is where it's important, what file system we're going to use. Now for myself in this tutorial, I'm just going to go with ext4. So we're going to want to format SDA3 with ext4. So there's our command right there, and of course we want to change out that. Now, one of the things that we can do, I have, of course, this right here in one window. I've got this in one window. So we're going to move this into the same window. So I'm going to do for me, it's a Shift-Alt-3 and take that out of that workspace and go into here. And now we have it on both sides. And I like to have my instructions always on the left side. I know that seems kind of silly, so I'm going to do an Alt-Shift-Left to move that over. And let's clear our screen over here, just get that cleaned up a bit. So let's do what it says here. Scroll back down here and find what we want to do. So I'm going to sudo mkfs.ext4/dev/sda3. Make sure you have the right spot. And yes, blow away all that hard work from last week. All right. Now, we don't have to worry about the make swap, and we don't have to turn on the swap because it's already on your host system. But next thing, we want to mount that which we just created into Mount Gentoo. You should know how to create the Mount Gentoo, and you will have to create this Mount Gentoo folder as root on your host system so that you can do this. So we've already done that, of course, and you should know how to do that. So now we're going to, of course, do like we kind of did before, sudo mount /dev/sda3 /mount Gentoo. And if we do an ls of that, we will see that we just have lost and found and there's nothing. All my other data is gone. We start all over. Now, there is some stuff that we need to look at. If temp is needed to reside on the separate partition, be sure to change the permissions. We're not going to be having temp reside on a separate partition, so we don't have to worry about that. So we can move on to installing stage 3. Stage 3 is going to lay down pretty much everything we need to get started. Now, the nice thing about doing this You don't have to worry about date because your date should be already set up for your host system. Nice thing you don't have to worry about. You don't have to worry about this. You don't have to change a lot of these things. We need to look at choosing our stage tarball. Now, most people are going to want the multi-lib 3264-bit, and honestly, if you're going to want to do anything that might have some gaming involved, if you want to utilize VirtualBox, things like that, you're going to want that multi-lib environment. If you're going to go strict pure 64-bit and you never want to look back, then don't worry about this. You can actually get a null multi-lib pure 64-bit. I'm going to be doing the multi-lib environment for now. So the best way to do this, since we are going from our host system, is we don't want to mess up that. So let's go into a new window and go back to Gen 2. And we're going to go to the, is it hiding it from me? Yeah, because it's too small. We're going to go to the downloads and we're going to find our stage 3 tarball right here. And we're going to go ahead and download that. And I'm going to throw it into my DasGrigger downloads on the host system for now. So let's save that. Let that download. That is 180 megs. It says it's going to take about 30 seconds and it's going pretty fast. So that should be there very quickly. While it does that, let's go back to our instructions. We are going through this very quickly. We do not have to worry about using links. That's what you would do if you had no graphic environment and you're strictly in the CLI interface. And plus our host system probably doesn't have links. So we can skip all of this stuff here. Now, if you want to verify the stage 3 and all that, you can do that, but we won't worry about that for now. Now, real quick, what we can do, since we are in a host system, is we can go over, open up IO's PCFMan, and let's go to our downloads directory real quick, and we will find that stage 3 tarball. We will copy that stage 3 tarball, and let's go up into, and I don't know if I'll be able to do this as my user account, but we will try. Go into Gen 2, and we want to paste it here, and is it going to do it? No, it did not. And the reason why is because we have root access only to this. We don't have our user access, so won't do that. So we will do sudo cp/home DasGrigger downloads wherever you put your stage 3 tarball, and we're going to want to copy that to our mount Gen 2 partition, and now we have that there. Now, if you feel like you need to check and validate, then do so. Otherwise, I normally don't worry about that section, but go straight down to unpacking the stage tarball. Now, let's go ahead and go into Gen 2 here. And of course, remember that because we need to be doing this as root, one of two things. You can constantly do the sudo command if you are set up as a sudo user, or we can just go ahead and go into root, so we don't have to worry about that. Now be very, very careful whenever you go into root that you know where you're at. Make sure you're in the right location. So for this, we're going to want to extract this tarball. So let's go back over here, and it gives you the command X, P, and F, stage. Now, you don't really need to do all this other stuff. If you know exactly what it is, you can just write it out, tab it out, etc. But we do want to use the -x attribute thing, -include, and you could copy and paste too, which would make this thing go faster, but not much. Numeric-owner. If you want to look up what those two commands do, then you can do a man on the tar command and it will explain what those are. So let me just double check my verbiage, and then we will hit enter. Now, one thing I wish I would have done before I had done this is put a V in that. And the reason why I like to put XV, V is for verbose, and I would see all the files going through. And I like to do that just so I can see that files are going. Otherwise, you won't see anything for a few moments, and you just have to assume that everything is working proper. And now if we do an ls over here in the Gen 2, we will see we have a base system that it extracted from the stage 3 tarball. One step done. Now it says we need to edit the make.conf and change C flags, CXX flags, etc. So let's go ahead and nano into that. Nano etc portage make.conf. You will see that this is a basic setup, and there will be a few things we want to do with this. Now, a lot of this we can leave alone, and it does explain here about the differences on the O flag for 2 and 3. They recommend greatly that you stick to the O3, and I agree. You should do that. The pipe command is a difference of how it either pipes to temporary files or pipes to communication, etc. And I like to just leave that as it is. There's not much that you need to worry about. It does talk about the C flags, and you can add the march native, which will just look to see what system you're running on. It doesn't have that by default. You can add it. It won't hurt it. So let's do that. So let's go up here to this area here, and we're going to mimic what it has. And that's going to be equal to native. And a lot of times we'll want to go ahead and add this section in right here. So go to our next line, CXX, and capitalization always counts, so remember that. $, and let me see. Yes, that is the special squiggly. C flags. There we go. Now the make ops, it'll explain to you that the make ops variable here has to do with how many cores and threads you have. This particular system that I am running off of is a Core i5 with 4 threads. So we're going to add in here make ops. We're going to add that, and we're going to put, I'm not crazy about going with full threads on this because it doesn't like a lot of those, so I'm going to go with J3. This is something that is a customized option that you can choose if you want your system to go full throttle when it does its compilations. You could take the number of threads that you have and add +1, and that's what it usually recommends. But I find a lot of times it causes a lot of overheating and issues with your CPU really grinding. It really won't affect your operation of the system while things are compiling in the background, but it will create a lot of heat. So, and I use singles instead of doubles, but always try to make sure that you're doing what it tells you to use. So there we go. -J3 is what we're going to use in our situation. Oh, moving on, update to Gen 2. That's all it's going to have us do in the make. We're going to visit this a few times, but for right now, that's all we need to do. So let's go ahead and save it. And now that we have that saved, we are ready to move on to installing the base system. CH rooting. Now, this is another thing that you can skip because you already have this, and we don't have the program mirror select to choose from a good mirror to use from. It's something you can do at a later date once you're inside and once you can start installing applications, you can actually emerge the mirror select and then do this to find what repositories are closest to you. So in this case, we're just going to we're going to skip that and move on down to the rest of this. Creating repositories, we want to do this. So we want to do, and I'm just going to go ahead for time's sake copy this instead of typing everything out. So I'm going to copy that there, paste it in there. And what it's going to do is create that repos.conf file. It's actually just going to create the directory for it. And by -- parents, it means that even though it might not exist somewhere in there, it's going to go ahead and create the parent for it instead of the other. So now we want to go into that directory. And I always forget I'm in the wrong section there. Let's go back over here so we can do that. So /mount Gentoo user share portage, and this is actually a different directory, config repos.conf, and we are copying that default repo to the Gentoo conf here. So /mount Gentoo, get over here, /mount Gentoo portage etc portage. That's why I use the tabs. It's really handy. If I use the tabs and it doesn't pop up, then I know I have an error in what I'm typing. And we're going to call this gentoo.conf. And if we do a quick look at that, and we don't want to do that, we want mount. Always be very, very careful when doing these. You notice up here, I did not have a / in the /etc. Yeah, I did that knowing that it would go forward to Etsy. But whenever you're doing these, make sure you have the right fully qualified name or whatever is required for that. Make sure you're always going into Mount Gentoo, etc. So if we do that in portage, and then we want to look at repos.conf and Gentoo, we will see that it built us this main repo equals Gentoo. If you do not do this, you will not be able to properly synchronize your emerge portage tree. Now we've got that done. It looks good. We don't have to worry with it anymore. And it kind of gives you a default of what it might look like right here. The next thing we want to do is we're actually going to take some information from your host system. So this right here is going to take information from your host. So you notice the / in front of the Etsy. And we're going to take the resolve comp from your host system and we're going to copy that to your new Gentoo system. So let's copy that, let's paste it, and now we have it. Now this is something that you could actually automate if you're planning on CH rooting into your system all the time. You could create a script to run these. For now, we're just going to go ahead and copy and paste each one manually if I can select it without losing that. So the first one sets up your procedures, procs. The next one sets up your system, and actually, let's see, make sure we don't do one we don't have to, since we're not using systemd, we do not have to do the make r slaves for these two. We just want to worry about proc, sys, and dev. So make sure you know that. Set up that one, and then lastly, dev. Copy it, paste it. There we go. Moving on, when using non-Gentoo installation media, now this might be important to you. So this is something you want to do. When using non-Gentoo installation media, which we're not, we're using LFS, this might not be sufficient. Some distributions make dev SHM a symbolic link to run SHM, which after the chroot becomes invalid, making a dev SHM a proper temp FS mount up front can fix this. So what we want to do this because this could, and I've done it once just to make sure it wouldn't hurt anything. So we're going to copy that test. We're going to paste that test. And then we're going to go ahead and do this mount command to set that up again. Copy that, paste it. And then we want to make sure that mode 1777 is set on that. Now this is only if you're using a non-Gentoo install media, in which case we're, like I said, we're using the host system for LFS, so we did that, and that should take care of it. That's one of the only things that you have to watch out for, and I did it in the first round. I didn't skip it just to see what would happen. I probably should have, just so we could see if we really needed to in my case. And now we can go ahead and chroot into this. So chroot mount gentoo bin bash. We will do that. And if I can copy all of that. I don't want this to be too long of a video. You can always pause things if you're concerned about stuff. So we're going to chroot in. We are going to set our source to etc profile. And we are going to create a new login, not right login, but prompt, so that we know where we're at. See, we see chroot, we're in LFS, because LFS is the host system. But if we do an ls, and if you notice, we're at root, and we are at root inside of our Gentoo system right now. In essence, the system in this command line interface area is thinking we are now Gentoo. And we have gotten into there. Now, we're not going to worry about the boot directory because we are going to be using LFS to boot Gentoo. So you do not have to worry about making the boot. It's already there, actually, right there. And we are not going to worry about mounting because we did not create a partition for that. So we can skip that portion. Now, the next step, of course, is to set up your repository snapshot. And this is very simple, emerge-web rsync. So we're just going to copy that and paste it. It's going to grab everything. Now, you do not need to worry about the fact that user portage and a few things might be missing in the beginning. It even says so here that in this, you might complain about missing user portage. It will create everything it needs to do, and everything should work fine. It also gives you a way that you can do this manually using just the old emerge-sync, which is how I usually update my portage, but for the first time, we are following the web rsync command to take care of this. If you don't want to see things, you can, with the emerge, you can always use a -- quiet. I myself enjoy seeing all the code going across the screen. I enjoy seeing everything that's happening and knowing what's happening when I see the code. So I don't like using quiet. I like a verbose log and everything else, just because I like to know exactly what's happening. This will take a few minutes depending upon the size and also depending upon the speed of your system. Now that we've done that, it wants us to look at the news items. Now in our case, we've got 10 news items. eSelect is your command for that. And what you can do is eSelect news list. And that will give you a list of all the new news items. Now we're not going to go through all of these. Some of these might mean something to you, some of these might not, but in the beginning, they really don't. You really don't need to know too much about this unless you just really want to go through and just see what it has to say. Going forward, after everything is built, you're going to want to be able to pay attention to these every time you update your system because it might be something you have to do to fix some things. So in this case, I want to go ahead and just tell it to read all of them just so it marks them red. So I'm going to go back to eSelect News. I'm going to say read all. And that just kind of lists them all. Now if we do a eSelect News list, you'll see they're all red. If you wanted just to look at number 1 or number 3, you would have said eSelect News read 3. eSelect News, say you want to learn about the GCC's 5 defaults, you'd say read 7, etc. So we've done that. We're good to go. Choosing the right profile, that's the next step. Gentoo has many different profiles you can choose from, and they can all make a difference on how the initial system is set up. So if we go to eSelect Profile List, you will see there are a lot more than just the 4 that they mention. They have 52 profiles, and you go, oh my goodness, DOS, that's just too much. I'm lost. It's too much. No, don't get scared. The big thing is Gentoo has recently migrated to 17, the 17 version profile, and it does, 17.1, it's all experimental EXP, so don't worry about that. You want to look at 17.0 for now. So that really narrows down your list to just this little bit right here. Right now, we're using, if you notice, default is 12. It's just a generic 17.0 profile with not very many use flags set up. Now, the way they'll explain it to you in the migration of this, the longer the profile name, the more use flag changes are made and the more updates you're going to have to do to set up your system. So depending upon how much you want Gentoo to take control and do things for you depends on how far down. For instance, right now, if you just wanted to do, say, a hardened, you could choose that. Or in a case of a desktop, but you don't know what version of the desktop, the most liberal one to use would be 16 in this case. Now, don't just say 16 because DOS said 16, because these numbers will change depending upon the profile you're doing. But if you just want a generic desktop, say you want i3, you don't really know if you want to go to GNOME or Plasma, and those seem to be the only ones, then you would want to choose, in your case, 16. That's going to set you up a broad use flag set, and these are things that you won't see these use flags. They're all in the profile that it places you. Now, if you wanted to have no multi-lib, a true 64-bit environment, then you'd want to choose one of these down here, like the 22, 23, no multi-lib stable, and then there's the hardened version, and then you could go that route. Now, the developer route, I thought at first, developer route might be for those who want to do programming and stuff. No, the developer route's more for those who do things for the Gentoo community. So it's not one that you'd want to choose from. So in our case, we want 16. So we'll go back down here. We'll do eSelect, Profile, Set 16. It'll set all that up. Now, if we do another list, we will see, if we go up here, that the asterisk is now on profile 16. And we're good to go. And we can move on down here. Now, they're talking about number 2, and they kind of mention that too, because in their instructions, they're still on the 13.0 versions of the profiles. We're going with 17 version because you don't want to go with 13 right now because you'll be forced into 17 and then it'll be a mess later on down the road. And it talks about too, about no multi-lib, whether or not you want to use systemd. I would never, ever, ever, if I had a choice, ever, did I say ever enough? Use systemd. Never, never, never. Moving on. Updating your world. Now this next step can take a long time to do. And you don't have to type out all that. This is one of my commands. Emerge AV U in capital N, capital D, and I'm having a brain, at world. And we'll see what that does. That is going to do the A, of course, for ask, the V for verbose, the U for update, the capital N for new use flags, which is very important right now because the new profile is going to grab a bunch of news flags, and then the D for deep. Now, if we look in here, it's going to install a lot of things. Yeah. Looks like glibc needs to be updated, and then there's a whole bunch of new applications that are going to be updated. 188 packages. These 188 packages for me on this slow system, they're going to take a long time to build. So at this point in time, I am going to pause the video. I'm going to let this go through, and many hours from now, we will pick up on where we left off. But real quick, let me think about this. There are a few things that we can do to figure out if we want to move forward, which might change some of these use flags. Now, what it talks about with use flags, there are two different ways to set up your use flags. One way is a global use flag, which you put in your make.conf. The other method is a per package use flag. When I first started with Gentoo, I did a lot of global use flags, and that caused a lot of problems down the road because you ended up with a lot of conflicts between packages that you might want to use that use flag on package A, but you didn't want to use that use flag on package B. So that's not something that you're going to want to really do too much with. The global things you might want to think of as system-wide. For instance, if you're going to use Pulse Audio, then yes, you'd want to use Pulse Audio for everything. You're never going to want a package. I want Pulse Audio on package, I don't know, Audacity, for instance, but I don't want to use Pulse Audio for VLC. No, no, no. If you're going to use Pulse Audio, you're going to want to use it across the board on everything. That is a good example of using Pulse Audio as a global flag instead of enabling it on a per package basis. If you want to make sure that you're building the X11 GUI interface for every package, you might want to make sure that you put X as a global object so everything is built with some sort of a GUI interface. And then if there are onesies, twosies, a package here or there that you don't necessarily want the GUI interface, or you don't care about it, then you could turn it off in a per package basis for those. I have found, like I said, with use flags, that it's best to do them mainly on a per package basis. Allow Gentoo to tell you these things. Use the command equery to see what the use flags do, and then make your judgment as to how you want to edit your package use area for those things. I'm looking at this now and I see that this video is already up to about 40 minutes. So what I'm going to do for right now is end the video actually for this section. I'm going to go ahead and allow the system to build those 188 packages. And once those 188 packages are built and everything looks good, then we will move forward with the next steps with part 2 of building Gentoo from a guest OS. So if it's morning, evening, noon, or night, whatever you're having, I hope you enjoy it. And enjoy building Gentoo. Don't be afraid to do it. If you're really nervous about it, VirtualBox is still your best friend just to try it, because if you mess something up, then you didn't really do anything to your main host system. Or the nice thing with VirtualBox is you can get so far and then you can create your snapshot so that you can play around and try different things to see what it might do to you by using different configurations. And if you don't like it, then you can just reset yourself back to that previous snapshot. Very handy. So enjoy Gentoo and have a good one. Bye, guys.